Hi, I'm Yulia, and this is the news brief. Today, we're going to talk about where we are exactly in the war between Russia and Ukraine. And then we're going to discuss it together in the comments so you don't have to suffer alone and I don't have to suffer alone. And of course, please leave your questions, suggestions, thoughts, constructive criticism, anything that you have in your mind, because I enjoy discussing it with you guys. I read all of it and it helps me greatly. Let's go. Russia has recently suffered its millionth casualty. That means that the amount of lost and wounded soldiers on Russia's side has literally reached 1 million people. Not too bad for a 3-day military operation, right? Right? The 3-day military operation has actually lasted 3.5 years now, so it's been a while. That now officially surpassed Russia's losses in Afghanistan and during World War II. Is that going to be Russia's turning tide? I mean, likely not, because Putin is going to continue waging war and nothing is going to change for Russia. We have obviously seen that they're not interested in negotiations. We talk about this every week on this channel. They're really not interested in changing anything or turning the tide. And if you have watched Russian street interviews, I don't know if you have, but I certainly have. The Russian people still think they're winning. Putin still thinks they're winning. Everyone in Russia seems to be fairly delusional. Russian people support this war still, even though, their sons and daughters, well, mostly sons, because Russia is a misogynistic country, and of course, women are not necessarily involved in anything military. Which in this case, I guess, good? I don't even know, honestly, what to comment to that. But in any case, Russian people are excited about the war. They're excited about their military parades. They love Putin. They appreciate him. They talk about him like he's king. They also consistently talk about the fact that they want to win the war. They're excited for the end of the war, but only if it ends in their favor, of course, because they're the mega country that has all the power and deserves to win. And and of course, everyone is living in this delusion that Russia will win. Meanwhile, Ukraine is striking very, very deep into Russia. The drone strikes are now targeting Tambov, uh, which is which is where the gunpowder plant is. Tambov is very deep into Russia. There is a song from Russian popular, I guess, during the fall of the Soviet Union, kind of like early 90s singer. There is this song from Russia from like I guess early 90s. To be honest, I might be wrong. It might have been in the Soviet Union, but it's an old song. And it's kind of like the boy wants to go to Tambov. And the song is basically about the fact that it's in the middle of nowhere and it's really, really far away and that you could be sent there. And to be fair, looking at the lyrics now, I think maybe like it's sarcastic and they're talking about a punishment, like the boy is behaving bad, so he wants to go to Tambov. So you can imagine how far away that is. And Ukraine is striking that with drones. We also know about a couple of successful Ukrainian operations at this point, destroying Russia's military infrastructure, airplanes, and production facilities very deep within Russia. So that's going to leave a mark, and that is bound to leave Russia harmed and also exposed. And of course, it's going to cause not just inconvenience, but it's going to cause uh, but it's going to cost Russia its ability to conduct warfare. Also, it's a massive strain on manpower and morale, and it could slow Russia's offensive capacity and push towards military exhaustion, which is arguably what Ukraine is doing here. And we could see that, like, Russia's morale is falling. We have seen all of the Russian military, or like I guess they're called military bloggers, talking about how Russia is not doing well and that these operations from Ukraine are a slap in the face, and it's quite crazy that Russia and Putin are allowing it, right? And are allowing Ukraine to so blatantly spit in their face because they know that this is not good news. The attacks on Kerch Bridge are not good news. None of this is good news. And none of this is straining Russia's ability to conduct war. But I mean, Russian authorities, of course, live in La La Land where that's impossible, and Russia is always ready for everything, and Russia is always going to continue waging warfare because they talk about the fact that they're prepared to have the war for the next, what, 20 or so years? And we can also see that Russian men are not eagerly joining the military, even with Russia promising them money and then, of course, never paying them off to their widows and to them in general. But point is, Russian men are not eagerly joining the military, and we can see that from the amount of foreign mercenaries and foreigners in general that are in Russia's military. There have been so many Chinese nationals, around 100 to 150, that have been caught fighting for Russia. There are also Uzbek nationals, there are Kazakh nationals, Kyrgyz nationals. We also know all of the horror stories from African nationals, where their countries are basically saying that they have been kidnapped to Russia, but in reality, they were just tricked into going to Russia and signing a military contract, thinking they would be having a desk job and being sent to the front lines. But all of that basically points to the fact that Russia is struggling, and they're not willing to show their struggle. Also, their national debt ceiling is about to like break through and collapse, and their stock markets are not doing great. Their economy is tanking, and they have been able to kind of supplement the economy this entire time. They have been able to kind of take it out of the complete downward spiral it has been on. But there is always an end to that, and there is always a ceiling to how much you can do when your country is literally collapsing before you. Now, with that said, I can say that obviously Ukraine is doing rainbows and butterflies. We have our own problems as well. Of course, there have been marginal gains from Russia, and I mean literally marginal. They have taken a couple of little villages in Sumy region a couple of weeks ago, and they're pushing in that front. They're pushing in the Donetsk front. They're pushing in Zaporizhia. They're pushing really everywhere, and our military is also exhausted, and our military is also having to deal with a lot. And of course, we also don't have a ton of Ukrainian men willfully conscripting because, of course, they have heard about all of the aid issues. They have seen the US rhetoric changing and the delays in aid. And the thing is, they would want to fight and they would go to fight because the cause is obviously something everyone in this country cares about. But they need to make sure that they're not going to be stranded without weapons or stranded without certain necessities. Like it has happened before when the West delayed large amounts of aid and Ukraine was not prepared. However, that tide is turning as well because of all of the successful operations that Ukraine has conducted so far in terms of destroying Russia's military ability recently. And hopefully, there will be more operations coming this summer because, of course, when you start because of course we're seeing an uptick in all of these fantastic asymmetric warfare operations, so that of course is boosting morale, and that of course is like helping people want to fight more because when you consistently just see bad news, of course your morale is falling, but when you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, it really does help. Meanwhile, what doesn't help is the US doesn't help. Secretary of State Marco Rubio recently congratulated Russia on Russia Day and talked about how he shares in their aspiration to do better, be better, and thrive and all that stuff. Imagine US Secretary of State would have congratulated Germany in the 1940s on Germany Day and said to the Nazis that he shares in their aspirations and wants them to thrive. Let that sink in for a second. Pete Hegseth, meanwhile, condemned some things about Russia, but then never actually called Ukraine a victim. Their rhetoric about Russia and Ukraine keeps bouncing back and forth. Then there are talks about aid cuts from the US. Also, Trump constantly keeps talking about sanctions that he never imposes, and then he starts talking about peace talks again that don't do anything because Russia is not interested in peace. So, of course, there are a lot of issues there. Europe, however, is really upticking their stance, and Europe is remilitarizing, and Europe is increasing aid. But it is scary for Europe, obviously, because if the US walks away, there are lots of things that will need to change, and there are lots of things that will need to change rapidly. And Europe has been actually doing a lot more, and Europe has been trying to stand on its own ground, on its own feet. And Europe does understand at this point that what's at stake and what needs to be done. However, there are bad actors in Europe, obviously, such as Orban, and now there is the new Polish president, and there is also the Fico. There are quite a few bad apples in there. So for the most part, Europe is homogenous on the fact that Ukraine needs to be supported. But, the prospect of the US just kind of falling into the fascist regime and doing the opposite and causing harm is really not good, because so far they have been causing a lot of harm, but it hasn't been like, I mean, deliberate. Like, it's deliberate, but it hasn't been necessarily like in support of Russia or, directly against Ukraine. And I know a lot of you might have a lot to say and disagree with me, and I understand. And I'm saying, like, it's kind of like, de jure and de facto. On paper, it hasn't been directly, but we know it has been. So, overall, I mean, if you were looking for answers as to what's next and what's going to happen, I don't have them for you, because we just really need to watch the news carefully, and everything is kind of unraveling right now and no one knows what's going to happen. But Ukraine is in a much more favorable position than Russia is, especially now that all of these successful operations are taking place. And we just need to monitor and see what's next. And then hopefully in a month, we're going to have a much clearer picture of where things are going to go next. For now, it's just a lot of things happening, a lot of unknown, and a lot of events. And that's all I have for you for today. And if you enjoyed this little summary, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel, turn on all of your notifications, like this video, send it to a friend, and of course, comment everything that you think. Maybe you want me to cover specific subjects, maybe you have questions, and I will take them into account for the next episode. See ya.